We've started the recording, so do as you want, but just don't say anything to delay your political career. Feel free to turn on your phone, turn down the volume, and go to our YouTube channel, and that makes it easier for people to find us on the internet. So we are told. Now, if you watch us on your YouTube, on your phone while we're up there, that would be strange. But do your own thing. Want to turn your volume down, of course.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Clement. I'll be the worship associate this morning. I've been either a long-term visitor or member of Unitarian churches since I was in Portland, Oregon, and so 25 years. We're really good at being long-term visitors sometimes, trying to decide whether or not we want to plunge in. I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Flint, a progressive LGBTQ affirming religious community in which people are encouraged to be themselves. If you'd like more information about our faith tradition or this congregation, please feel free to talk with one of our ministers today or via their contact information that may be found at uuflint.org. If you're a visitor and you're interested in receiving our weekly email newsletter, you can sign up for that at our website, scan the QR code on the order of service, or complete this fancy card that's in the seat backs in the sanctuary. This is the part where I go off script, which the ministers love. If you're a visitor new to Unitarian Universalism and aren't exactly sure who the heck we are, I can give you a good general sense of who we are with two good jokes. First, UUs are notoriously poor singers because they're always reading 2 lines ahead to make sure they agree with the words. We are free thinkers and don't like being told what to believe. But maybe we overthink things a little bit. Cue up the next joke. You may be a Unitarian Universalist if on Halloween you explain to everyone the pagan significance of their costumes. You get mail from committees that you didn't know you were on. You considered, this is a good one for you, you consider Millard Fillmore one of the greatest U.S. presidents because he was Unitarian. That's just for Jerry. You have debated the existence, nature, or gender of God. Or you think the Holy Trinity is reduce, reuse, and recycle. All right. So please see the back of the order of service for important announcements. And I'd like to highlight a few for you. We continue to have issues with scammers attempting to get our members to buy gift cards using Reverend Lynn and Reverend Jerry's emails, pictures, and texts. These scammers always ask you to act quickly, which shows they know very little about how churches actually do business. Rest assured, Jerry and Lynn will never ask you to buy gifts, at least not by text or email. If an email or text looks odd to you, trust your gut reaction and call to find out if it is real. One of our compassionate Act Now members got taken for $300. Contact Jerry or Lynn if you want to contribute any amount, large or small, to help them. Your opinions matter. It's not too late to take the very short survey to determine future events here at UUCF. There is a link in the e-update. Please save June 9th after the service for our annual congregational meeting, where we will be voting on important issues such as new leadership, our budget, and delegates for General Assembly. Our leadership promises the meeting to be mercifully short. I don't buy it. If you'd like an update on the anti-homosexuality law in Uganda and the current appeal process and the conditions on the ground, there will be a Zoom meeting with 2 activists in Uganda on May 30th at 7:30 p.m. This is a joint meeting with an Ohio UCC Church social justice group. The code for the meeting will be published soon. And I think that brings us to our chalice lighting. Uh-oh.
No whip. I can do that.
Matches.
Oh, here we go. Okay, go ahead.
A well-oiled machine up here. We light our chalice in honor of the universal wild creature that is more accessible to our eyes and ears and closer to us and everyone in the world than all others, the bird. And join me please in reciting our covenant, recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service. We gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to increase goodness and justice.
Early each day to the steps of St. Paul's, the old little bird woman comes, in her own special way to the people she calls. Come buy my bags full of crumbs. Come feed the little birds, show them you care. You'll be glad if you do. The young ones are hungry, their nests are so bare. All it takes is tuppence from you. Feed the birds, tuppence a bag, tuppence, tuppence, tuppence a bag. Feed the birds, that's what she cries, while overhead her birds fill the skies. All around the cathedral, the saints and apostles look down as she sells her wares. Although you can't see it, you know they are smiling each time someone shows that he cares. are simple and few. Listen, listen, she's calling to you. Feed the birds, tuppence a bag, tuppence, tuppence, tuppence a bag.
Our opening words are those of Emily Dickinson. A bird came down the walk. He did not know I saw. He bit an angleworm in halves and ate the fellow raw. And then he drank a dew from a convenient grass and then hopped sideways to the wall to let a beetle pass. He glanced with rapid eyes that hurried all abroad. They looked like frightened beads, I thought. He stirred his velvet head. Like one in danger, cautious, I offered him a crumb, and he unrolled his feathers and rowed him softer home, softer than oars divide the ocean, too silver for a seam, or butterflies off banks of noon leap splashless as they swim.
Stand if you're able and willing, if you feel like it. Be seated if you so choose.
After our words of meditation and our time of silence, you'll be invited to come forward and light a candle of joy or concern if you like. And you can do that at the back as well if you prefer. And you can also write in our Joys and Concerns book at the back, and we'll get it put into our weekly e-newsletter. Do not live too far in the past or the future. Live now. In each moment, expect a miracle. 10 kinds of birds at the feeder, and the tracks of a fox in the snow. Pick up a magnifying glass and scrutinize that crocus. See the pollen at the center of the daffodil, life's dust, death-defying life. Be astonished at that flower, arrested by its beauty. Run naked through the garden early in the morning and hope the wild geese fly by. Get silly and laugh loudly with your grandchildren or your grandparents. Refuse to leave the dead behind, but bring their memory to all your chores and games, and corners of quiet, warm tears. Know always that joy and sorrow are woven together. One cannot be without the other. If you love, know that sometimes your love will bring you tears. If you grieve, know it is because at some time you were willing to love. Don't be afraid to die today, but expect life. Let us enjoy the silence.
Amen.
In 2017, a film crew for the David Attenborough's BBC series Dynasties went to Antarctica to film a colony of emperor penguins. Author Stephen Moss explains what happened. Of all the many dramatic scenes they had witnessed during their long stay in Antarctica, this was by far the most distressing. A group of 50 emperor penguins, mostly carrying a single chick, balanced precariously on their feet, had somehow slipped down the steep sides of a gully. They were unable to escape. This presented the production team with a tricky ethical dilemma. If they did nothing, the penguins would eventually starve to death. But if they decided to intervene and help the birds reach safety, they would transgress the code of conduct for wildlife filmmakers, whose most sacred principle is never intervene. This might sound cruel, but the code is there for a purpose. As soon as a filmmaker intervenes to influence a natural process, for example, by helping a helpless baby antelope from being killed by a lion, they have stepped over that invisible boundary separating the observer from the observed and interfered with the natural course of nature. As the calming voice of Sir David Attenborough explains over shots, including a chick that has already frozen to death in the gully, film crews have to capture events as they unfold, whatever their feelings. It seemed that the team could do nothing to help. This did, of course, not stop them from caring deeply about the terrible calamity they were being forced to witness and film. Cameraman Lindsay McCrae wiped a tear from his eye as he spoke. I know it's natural, but it's bloody hard to watch. Soon afterwards, however, there was a glimmer of hope. One plucky penguin, still carrying a chick on his feet, managed to clamber up out of the gully. The crew watched as he used his short but powerful wings and then finally his beak as it laboriously levered its way to safety. 2 days later, when the weather had cleared and they could return to the gully, the crew was heartbroken to see that the situation had deteriorated. Knowing that they could not intervene directly, for example, they could not pick them up and move them, they nevertheless decided to give the birds an option. So they dug a ramp with a series of shallow steps cut into the ice so that the birds could perhaps escape on their own. To their relief, the penguins took advantage of the new route on the ramp and got out of the gully. All the rest managed to survive. When the episode was broadcast, the BBC made the bold decision to place the rescue at the center of the entire story of that episode. They also made it clear how and why the film crew had decided, despite that rigorous code of conduct, to intervene. The response was overwhelmingly positive. The crew's decision had, it seemed, been vindicated. The director, Will Lawson, was billed as the man who helped save the penguins. In some respects, he reflected, the environment is almost like a predator. But he had hit the nail on the head. For the main threat facing not just emperor penguins, but all the world's living creatures is environmental change. The emperor penguin is facing oblivion for one reason alone: the global climate crisis caused by us.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings, learn to fly. For your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arise. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes, learn to see. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly, into the land of dark black night. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly, into the land of the dark black night. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise.
I'd like you to meet ARTE 071013O. We're going to call her Crystal. Her life story might go something like this. She hatched on a rocky beach at the northern tip of Sand Island, Greenland, around about July 16th. After about 3 days, 2.5-inch Crystal ventured in and out of her nest, concealing herself in some sparse grass from falcons and gulls that prey on tiny little morsels like her. Of course, neither her mom or dad were ever far away. And when a predator is overhead, one of them stands over Crystal with their wings spread way out and their sharp bill pointing upward, while the other dive bombs. They do the same thing when humans try to tag the birds, making it pretty dicey. Now, if you ever wondered if birds care about their young, you've never seen birds feeding their hatchlings. By the way, if you'd like to see a bunch of hatchlings right now, or especially of birds of prey, Cornell has a site called allaboutbirds.org, and you can watch them live. And I thought my son's feeding schedule was horrendous. because just like his, Crystal cannot get enough of her fresh fish that her parents keep bringing her for the first 2 months. It seems constant. Of course, she's also discovered that there's insects around the nest, and they make great between meal snacks. Now, slowly, Crystal's downy fluff is going to develop a bit, and the little pegs that she has on the side of her body are going to start to resemble wings. But no one has told her that in her lifetime, they're eventually going to carry her the equivalence of 3 times the distance to the moon and back. But to get started, her parents are encouraging her to take just brief flights every day. She's also learning to take short dives into the frigid water for food, but since she only gets an occasional morsel of fish at this stage, her parents are still providing her with regular meals. Well, that is until one day her parents stop visiting her. And Crystal's on her own. So Crystal has to satisfy her voracious appetite all on her own. And then suddenly, the sky and some internal something tells Crystal and the whole flock it's time to go. And they begin their annual 12,000-mile journey to Antarctica to follow the sun. And the Arctic Tern then sees more hours of sunlight than any other animal on the planet. So it's a pretty amazing life. But can we learn anything from them or from any bird besides they're pretty? I believe our human fascination and connection to these wonders of the air can actually teach us a lot about compassion and also inspire us to save the planet for them and eventually for us. Now, no one can really say that they can't find a bird for inspiration. There is nowhere on the earth from the equator to either pole that you cannot find a bird. And that is one reason that throughout human history, birds have been idolized by almost every culture. Birds are part of almost every origin story in religions. They're revered as sacred animals with miraculous powers that fly, navigate, make beautiful songs. And some of their skills have so captivated humans that we've copied them. Certain birds have been trained to help us hunt and even work in wars, and they've also made faithful companions. I think we've long admired birds because we can see ourselves in some of their behaviors and their habits. Even the mere sight of a bird has been scientifically proven to lift our mood. Simply put, as world-renowned biologist and conservationist Sir David Attenborough says, everyone likes birds. In fact, some people are just downright fanatical. If you have ever watched a group of birders at migration time, when someone has spotted a rare warbler, you know what I mean. Some people will actually go to the ends of the earth just to get a peek at a Kirtland's warbler. Anybody seen a Kirtland's warbler? Wow, okay. They're rare. And although cliche, other people see birds as spiritual messengers. And your own ministers will readily tell you about their totem bird animals. And who doesn't? Who doesn't scream for their partner to slam on the brakes when there's a bird sitting on the side of the road who is just perfectly poised for a portrait? Yeah? Right. Okay, good. Yeah. So no matter what calls us to follow birds, there is something deep behind our obsession with them, I think. And it might make you wonder who really has the bird brain. Wonder no longer. Although the term bird brain has been pejorative since the beginning of the 20th century, we might want to reconsider that phrase to be a compliment. Researchers have found that although they have one of the tiniest brains, they really pack a wallop. Birds have twice as many neurons in that little space than primates. And they only use a third of the energy to get those neurons working. So whatever their specialty is, they're just more efficient at using their brains than we are. So it's not surprising that some birds can use tools, others can remember faces, some talk, some even solve puzzles. A raven was even documented as recently warning a woman that a mountain lion was about to pounce on her. Furthermore, each individual species has its own particular song, and several songs depending on what they're doing. They have complicated courting rituals and elaborate home building techniques. The Parodia of New Guinea, for instance, has such a complicated courtship dance that first the father has to teach the son how to do it. Then groups of adolescent males perch above adult males who are wooing females, and then they learn how to perfect the dance. All I wanted was dinner and a movie. And how about birds with their tiny brains and navigation? How many of us can go somewhere new without Google Maps? Jerry got lost a couple weeks ago for over half an hour because he didn't have his phone with him, forgot his phone. And just like a bird, he was unable to stop and ask directions. Yet Arctic terns like Crystal fly from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back again all in a year. And luckily, she's got a real good chance of making it because she is protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. And that makes it a breeze for Crystal and her friends to stop for lobster at Acadia National Park or Delaware Harbor, or maybe have an extended layover on the beach with pina coladas in the Caribbean on their way to Antarctica each year. Now, some of the other flocks may have stopped at the Great Barrier Reef or maybe in Europe. You might wonder, though, how do they cope with no pillow or beverage service on such a long flight? Arctic terns' bodies are made to glide with the currents, the wind currents, and they have the unique ability to both eat and sleep in the air. Now, by December, all the Arctic terns will land at the South Pole. And they'll perch on ice packs and forage in groups until about February. And that's when their little clocks inside are going to tell them, and the sun will tell them it's time to leave again. Now this time, instead of making all those little stops, they're going to pretty much have a direct route. They're all going to follow it and go to the opposite pole. And researchers guess that they do this because this time they're kind of anxious because they want to breed. And they want to get there as fast as they can. But not Crystal. Because Crystal is not mature enough yet to be a mom. So she's got to make about 2 more trips before she's ready. But in her 4th year, she is now full-blown adult. And like every other tern who becomes an adult, she's going to return to the exact beach where she was born or hatched. And then what's going to happen is all the male terns are going to be hovering over the colony, and all the females are going to be down on the sand. And the males are going to be looking for mates, and the females are going to kind of be looking for mates. They could take them or leave them sometimes. And a really neat thing about the males is they're going to be hovering like a hummingbird, and they're the only other bird that can do that. Stay in one place, hover. And a male is going to fancy Crystal, and he's going to plunge nearly 2 feet into the sea and pluck out a small cod. But rather than eating it, he is going to go over to Crystal and drop it at her feet. She actually prefers roses, but the cod is a nice gesture. So then the male is going to posture and bow and shake his head and strut. And Crystal is going to decide to give him a chance. And so they're both going to take to the air and do some more ritual up there and some maneuvers. And finally, with her approval, they will land and they will mate. With no realtor in sight, they're going to head out to find the proper site for a nest together. And once they find it, they're going to create a suitable shallow nest by scraping the beach. Get up the big rocks out of the way and kind of scrape it out. So it's going to be pretty shallow. And then there, Crystal will lay about 3 eggs. And for 3 weeks, they're going to take turns incubating them. So one can go fishing, the other can sit, and then they'll switch off. And as they sit, they're going to pull roots and grass and maybe a few pebbles around, maybe some beach glass if they see it, whatever they find, it doesn't matter, but kind of around it, make it look pretty, redecorating. Because I imagine that it does get kind of tiring just sitting on those eggs, and I think that's why pregnant women redecorate nurseries all the time, because you just don't know what to do with yourself. So they're going to both kind of decorate the outside. And one day, though, while they are swapping positions, an opportunistic raven swoops in and swipes one of the eggs. And despite the furious flapping of the wings and all the squawking, it's gone. So Crystal sullenly sits back down on her 2 remaining eggs. And soon, one of them begins to move. And within hours, a hatchling has emerged. Now, Crystal remains with that chick while her partner goes and fetches tiny little fish for the hungry newcomer. And he goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And he feeds his mate as well. And then the second day, another chick appears. And Crystal stays for almost 3 days while the daddy hunts and feeds all 3 of them. And then finally, Crystal decides it's time for her to go out and get groceries while the male watches the chicks, and the chicks decide it's time to leave the nest for the first time. They don't go very far. And then after 4 weeks, the chicks are ready to start to learn to fish for themselves. And Crystal and her mate are pretty darn tired. Remember where you were if you had kids in about 4 weeks? So, but they continue to demonstrate diving and flying. And then one morning they just realize the chicks are good. They're doing pretty well. And they're able to live on their own. So the mate flies off, and then Crystal decides to go fishing, but she swallows her fish. And then she goes to the other side of the island. Now, do you suppose they miss each other? We don't know, we can't know, but we do know that all of the terns have a very good chance of survival for probably another 20 years. However, although they're not endangered, large portions of the places where they stop off during their migration are at great risk due to climate change. As the oceans warm up, the sea creatures that they feed upon are dying out, and they're moving to different places, so that at the exact time that the migration happens, where they used to stop off and feed, food's not there anymore. The connections are many, and they are tragic. As I mentioned, man-made issues like this are also putting birds like the emperor penguins at risk, the ones I talked about in the reading. And of course, in the specific penguins, the 50 of them, humans saved them as well, but they also caused the problem in the first place. That BBC film crew, when they went home, they were so afraid that they were going to be chastised for breaking that no interference rule. But when David Attenborough said he probably would have done the same thing, they were so relieved. And besides, they didn't touch the birds, right? They just created a way for them to get out. And boy, do I understand how hard it is to keep your contact to a minimum when you are working with wildlife. Because many years ago, some of you know that when I was on a sabbatical from ministry, I volunteered at a wildlife rehabilitation and education center in Ohio. And the hardest thing for me to learn was that if you really cared about those wild animals, it meant you didn't talk to them, you didn't touch them unless it was absolutely necessary, and you never, ever named them. I mean, that all made sense. Their best chance for being released back out into the wild was for them to be wary of humans. But here I am, a minister trained to act quite differently when someone's hurt or scared. I'm taught to comfort. But with wild animals, you do not offer some soothing voice or gentle touches when something needs comforting. So imagine how hard it was for me to be charged with raising what you're going to see next in my spare bedroom so that it could be later released into the wild. Unbelievably cute, fluffy, innocent, very hungry all the time. I mean, don't you want to just hug it and squeeze it? Yes. Well, I did too. But I didn't, I swear. Instead, I dutifully fed this barred owlet every 2 hours, along with about 20 other baby birds until they were all old enough to eat on their own. This was all the while our cats, I don't know if you remember this, but our cats would pace back and forth outside the spare bedroom door. They suspected there was something really good to eat on the other side. Eventually, that owlet turned into a full-grown owl. And my last glimpse of him was as he sat on a branch until he finally disappeared into the forest. So just like all the people who rescued owlets or baby groundhogs from their yards, saving just 1 or 2 little creatures makes us feel really good. And I think that's what happened with those emperor penguins. People accepted the crew's efforts because they were able to see them as individual animals that were in trouble. Stephen Moss, a leading British environmentalist and author, says that the clips on YouTube of the rescue is the perfect metaphor for the wider climate crisis, because everyone was focused on the immediate plight of those 50 penguins, and who wouldn't feel compassion for them. Ma says that sometimes people need to see more individual situations in order to be moved to action about a much bigger problem. When we're faced with the enormity of the extinction of millions of animals, and perhaps even ourselves, it's almost too much for us to cope with, so some people just deny or ignore. Now, although I'm pretty sure that most of us believe in climate change and want to do something, I want to give you a little bit of an example of how this works. Here's a few factoids. In 3 years, the amazing emperor penguins went from the least concern in terms of extinction to near threatened. 3 years. A few years ago, scientists found that 10,000 chicks drowned in one area because the ice melted due to warming temperatures. And lastly, if the warming trend continues as it is, 90%, 90, of all emperor penguins most likely will be gone by the year 2100, 75 years. Now, those are pretty sobering numbers, and I'm guessing that most of us are disturbed. But now, I want you to think about people looking at those poor 50 penguins sitting in a gully, 3 feet tall, the penguin dad faces, the little tiny babies on their feet, the wind's whistling, and knowing they're going to die within days. And then someone tells you, if we don't do something about climate change, this is going to happen more often. Now, everybody in the world is concerned. They want them to live. Save the penguins, save the penguins. People discover that penguins really care for their babies, just kind of like humans, although I've seen some humans treat their babies a lot worse than the penguins. So now we have people's attention. That's how it works. It's unfortunate, but sometimes that's how it works. Unfortunately, sometimes it comes too late. It may already be too late for the emperor penguins. For instance, it was common practice to have Christmas side hunts. You may have heard of them before. Groups would choose sides, and then they'd go out on Christmas Day and they'd say who could kill the most animals, including birds. And Frank Chapman was an ornithologist, and he was also a hunter, and he was an avid participant in this particular hunt. But one summer's day in 1886, he was walking along the most fashionable place in Manhattan for ladies to shop. And he was looking at all the women with hats. Decided to count them, just for fun. Counted 700 hats. But of the 700 hats, 525 of them had feathers in them. Then he decided to count how many species he could tell had within those hats. And he counted that there were 60 species within those hats. Now, just another little factoid about this, there were so many hats with feathers that between 1870 and 1920, 10 billion birds were killed for their feathers, for hats and other things. And just for perspective, that was 10 billion. Right now, there's only 50 billion birds in the whole world. So anyway, Chapman counted all those bird feathers and all the different kinds of birds, and what really shocked him with all the species is that it used to be just pheasants and water birds that they would use for feathers, but he saw owls, woodpeckers, blue jays, swallows, flycatchers, warblers. He even saw orioles. Well, I get the orioles because Jerry and I really enjoy those feathers as well. Well, actually, we enjoy the whole bird. And we spend a lot of money on them too, because, I don't know, we're buying oranges, I think $1.50 a piece or some terrible thing. They're pretty. Well, the women thought they were pretty too. But Chapman was so disgusted that by Christmas Day of the year 1900, he had convinced people to stop doing that hunt, and he turned it into the annual Christmas bird count. And some of you, I bet you participate. The first time they did it in the US and Canada, they counted 18,500 birds and 90 different species. Now today they count, there's about 80,000 people doing it. They count 49 million birds, about 2,600 species. But I hate to tell you, but within 50 years, they predict that those numbers, they're not going to go up. They'll be cut in half because of extinction. So there was hope then, and there continues to be some hope today, that there's going to be organizations and there's going to be individuals and there's going to be presidents that are going to work to save the birds. Yet, as many as 1 in 8 of the world's birds are still in danger of becoming extinct at this very moment. According to Stephen Moss, the emperor penguin is the poster bird for the impending catastrophe of climate change. They will likely go extinct first. They're the next on the list. But a lot more will follow. So I wonder if it's going to take empty bird feeders outside our windows before most of North America starts to go, oh, they're gone. Perhaps we can be bird brains and be smart about saving this most precious resource, because they can show us so much about how to be human. Thanks.
Reverend Lynn, that was inspired and inspiring. Thank you. As we approach this time for generosity, give what you will for the church that has meant so much to you, for the church that meant so much to those who came before you, and for the church that will mean so much to people you will never know. Give what you will, for you are a generous people. Please give by placing your offering in the basket at the back of the sanctuary as you leave, or by an online gift at uuflint.org. Thank you for the many gifts you receive. You give and receive.
Our closing words are from Victor Hugo. Be like the bird who, pausing in her flight a while on boughs too slight, feels them give way beneath her, and yet sings, knowing she hath wings.
And let us extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, without the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Don't worry about a thing. Every little thing gonna be alright. Don't worry about a thing. 'Cause every little thing gonna be alright. Rise up this morning, smile with the rising sun. Three little birds pitched by my doorstep, singing sweet songs. saying, this is my message to you. Singing, don't worry about a thing. Every little thing gonna be alright. Singing, don't worry about a thing. 'Cause every little thing gonna be alright. Rise up this morning, smile with the rising sun. Three little birds pitched up by my doorstep, singing sweet songs, melodies pure and true. Singing, this is my message to you. Singing, don't worry about a thing. Every little thing is gonna be alright. Singing, don't worry about a thing. 'Cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Singing, don't worry about a thing. Every little thing is gonna be alright. Don't worry about a thing. 'Cause every little thing gonna be alright.
Thank you. Everyone is welcome to either stay up here for 10 minutes or so, or you may go directly downstairs for coffee hour. The rest of us will be down in a few minutes, but you're very welcome to do either. But now is a time for any comments, if anyone has any, for the next few minutes. And he'll bring the mic to you, so
Yeah,
please
you always
use
got to
the,
just stick it.
please use the
Most
mic.
people know this game, but oh, Dave's got something to say. There we go.
I've always had a huge respect for people who know and understand birds well, and the one book that I've read that I would recommend about birding and birds is my dad died 9 years ago, and one of the things that helped me in my grieving process was reading a book called H is for Hawk, if anyone's heard of it. It's a bestseller maybe 10 years ago, and I'm just going to read the 2-sentence summary of it. As a child, Helen MacDonald was determined to become a falconer. She learned the arcane terminology and read all the classic books, including T.H. White's tortured masterpiece, The Goshawk, which describes White's struggle to train a hawk as a spiritual contest. When her father dies and she is knocked sideways by grief, she becomes obsessed with the idea of training her own goshawk. Fantastic read.
Thanks, David.
Looks to be like we'd rather
All
go have
right.
this conversation with coffee.
All
Let's
right.
go do that.
Let's do it. Thanks for being here.